Simon, there's been a response, all right, to Jurgen Klopp. Jurgen Klopp, we know, has been suspended from the touchline for 2 matches and fined £75,000 following the media comments that he made after Liverpool's Premier League game against Tottenham last month. So, therefore, he will not be on the sideline for Saturday's Premier League game with Aston Villa at Anfield. He should return against Southampton on the final day of the season. The second match of the ban is suspended until the end of the 23-24 season on condition that he doesn't commit any further breaches of FA rules. But what it means is he probably won't be touchline. Well, we won't be touchline for what potentially could be the final game at Anfield for the likes of James Milner and 1 or 2 others, Roberto Firmino. Now, in the report, the Commission referred to Klopp's recent history of poor behaviour. It said, Mr. Klopp is a high-profile figure who's required to lead by example. He has a history of breaches. Most recently, in November 2022, the assertions that Mr. Klopp made against Mr. Paul Tierney, the referee, were unacceptable, ranging as they did beyond the immediate match. So we'll get into the minutiae of what Klopp said and what the report has said there. But what this now says is that Klopp is a repeat offender. So 2 matches and 75 grand, have they come down on him hard enough?
It depends if he does it again. It's designed to be a deterrent, isn't it? If the outcome is that this is a deterrent and he doesn't do it again, then it'd come down on him hard enough, wouldn't they? I mean, ultimately, what is it that we want him to do? Be putting some stocks, throwing some tomatoes at him and beat him to a pulp. The bottom line is he's behaved poorly. And he's had to climb down. If you read his letter of contrition, it's not actually posting him as much of a statesman or leader, is it? It's a sort of snivelling letter to apologise for things that he's done and explain the reasons why he's done them. And the only way we will tell if this is if this sanction is strong enough is if he does it again. And if he doesn't do it again, then the sanction will have served its purpose. I suspect that the quantum of money has been ratcheted up rather than the consequence of games. The fact that the consequence of games is almost irrelevant because they sit up in the stands and conduct their affairs from there anyway by communicating with whomsoever they please is almost laughable. I think people that get banned from managing the side shouldn't be allowed to be in the stadium and possibly shouldn't be allowed to coach the players during the week. Yeah. That will consequence people to concentrate their mind about how they should and shouldn't behave. Yeah. What I also really didn't like, and the part I really didn't like, was Klopp going down the touchline and going at the 4th official is almost like the 4th official is the enemy. He's needing to go and celebrate in the face of the opposition. The 4th official isn't the opposition. The 4th official isn't the enemy. Neither is the referee. Neither are the linesmen. They're component parts of the football match in the same way that you are.
Well, that's right,
and that's
Simon.
What I don't like about it.
And I think Simon's absolutely right to highlight that because we don't like it. So what's come out is this. The written reasons shed light on the conversation Tierney had with Klopp, which the Liverpool boss took exception to at the time. They tell us that Mr. Klopp immediately left the technical area, ran up the touchline where he shouted something at John Brooks, the 4th official. Mr. Brooks, as Simon said there, Mr. Brooks contacted Mr. Tierney, the referee, and said, Klopp's just run and celebrated in my face. I think it's a yellow card, mate, minimum. So it's clear that Brooks considered Klopp's conduct to be misplaced celebration rather than an aggressive or threatening move. Tierney responded saying he had not seen what happened and needed advice as to whether the sanction should be a yellow or a red. The video assistant referee reviewed the video footage and advised confirm yellow, Jurgen Klopp. So armed with that, Tierney went to Klopp and showed him a yellow card saying, right, I've got to show you yellow. It could be red, but I'm going to show you yellow. And he said, yellow. We'll give you the benefit of the doubt. Don't do anything more. So Klopp was well and truly put in his place, but fairly put in his place, Stuart.
Well, I'm not sure how Mr. Tierney's right front and centre of all of this, really. He's took advice from others around him, his team. That's what they are, a team on the day. Yeah. And the managers ended up being booked. I mean, I think it's got to start on the pitch with the players, the discipline situation, more so than the managers. Personally, Simon, you might disagree and say, well, the managers are the focal
standard
points
bearers,
to this, to that, to stand about. I understand that. But for every one instance of a manager stepping over the line in the technical area, I can probably show you 50 instances of a player effing and blinding at a referee. And I think it's got to stop there, because I think it's
That's
just getting out of control.
That's up to the officials. We said this to Howard Webb on Monday.
Exactly, it is.
You guys shouldn't tolerate this. So when are you going to start getting some authority?
Yeah.
When are you going to start demanding and commanding respect on the pitch? But the problem is that players, it's like going to a restaurant and having a bad meal. If you have a good meal, you tell one person. If you have a bad meal, you tell 10. If a manager does one thing, it will allow players to do 20, because the manager has to be the absolute standard bearer. He can never be out of sync with the discipline that he demands of his side. He has to be beyond reproach. So when you start to move into the territory of a manager stepping across the line, I do think, without wanting to be pedantic, I do think the language that Tierney uses towards Jurgen Klopp is slightly incendiary. He doesn't need to give him a lecture about what it could have been. He just needs to walk up to him and go, yellow card, end the discussion, move away. He doesn't need...
He's telling him you've been lucky here.
No.
It could have been red, but I'm showing you yellow.
Hold on. There's a slight net element of that's not necessary. I'm critical of Klopp in this. I've been critical from the outset. I actually called him quite a few names about the genuity of the things he was saying, and I'm not sure if it got dumped or carried. But the point is this, is that I look at that language and I think, if I'm on the receiving end, because I've seen referees and they can be patronising swines at times, and I've seen referees behave in a certain way. That referee, all he needed to do was go up to Jurgen Klopp and say, you're not lucky because I'm not giving you a yellow card. Here's your yellow card, move away.
Patronising swines.
But have you ever encountered David Ellery? Because I have.
Well,
have you ever encountered some of these referees? And you will speak to this as well, Stuart.
Let me tell you a story about David Ellery. I was booked in a game. We played, I think, Blackburn at home. I was booked in a game, and on 80 minutes I made a challenge that was another bookable offence. And he walked up to me and he looked at his watch and he went, do you think you can stay out of trouble for another 10 minutes, son?
Yeah, that's a good example.
I went, yes, I can. Brilliant. Thank you very much. And after the game, as we walked off, I went over, shook his hand and said, thanks very much for that. You no need to have done that. You should have sent me off.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I thought it was brilliant refereeing.
Yeah.
The game was won by the opposition at the time anyway. And from that moment on, I've got a connection with him that every time he refereed my game, I would make sure that I would help him referee the game and conduct myself in the right and proper manner.
But patronising.
We're not talking about David Ellery. We're talking about Paul Tierney, and we're talking about my reaction.
You mentioned Ellery. You threw Ellery's name into the mix.
Okay, then I can give you a list of players that have told me that they have a deep problem with David Ellery and his patronising nature. I can talk about players that have got an attitude towards the headmastery approach that he had and the way that he patronised them. So Stuart's given us one example. I do think, because given the fact that I've been absolutely robustly critical of Klopp to such a point that people think I've got a problem with him, if I then give the counterbalance to the argument, which I don't think that Tierney needed to start down the sentiment of going, you could have got a red card, watch yourself, don't do it again. I just think the referee should be going, here's your yellow card, move on. That's what I think.
He said, right, I have to show you yellow. It could be red, but I'm going to show you yellow. He's being lenient with him, and he's pointing that out. You've got another life, Jurgen.
Yeah, but you're not dealing with a child, you're dealing with adults. And so with that in mind, I think personally, from my point of view, looking at it through the eyes of trying to get balance into this conversation rather than just loading our guns after Klopp, that I also think that there is two sides to every conversation. I think the rest of it, I think Klopp's outburst after the game is a disgrace. And I think he meant to say precisely what he implied.
And that's what he's been punished for, in fairness.
Well, that's exactly right.
Yeah.
And I think that what he said after the game, and I think is, first and foremost, he's written a letter of contrition. If he didn't write this letter of contrition, people like us would be saying on media, he's shown no contrition. So he's written a letter of contrition, and now we're going to castigate his letter of contrition. But the point is that there's hypocrisy in it, because he knew what he was saying, he knew what he meant, he acknowledges the fact that ultimately the fella doesn't have a bias, yet made the specific and explicit point, and has been able to wriggle out of it by saying that I said it was not okay. Everybody in the world, even the most biased of Liverpool fans, knew what Jurgen Klopp was implying. He was implying that this guy was not acting in an impartial fashion, and that ultimately there are consequences for what he said to him. He said nothing to him.
You see, in the letter to the Commission from Klopp, Stuart, he says, on one hand, to be absolutely clear, I know that Mr. Tierney, along with all other officials, do their work without any preconceived bias or prejudice. Although not an excuse, I believe we've made up a high percentage of Mr. Tierney's matches this season. Something in the region of 20% of the matches he has officiated have involved my team. I don't offer this as a defence, rather an observation, and could be a reason for both the build-up of frustration governed by an inadvertent accumulation of incidents over an extended period. Tierney's getting the Liverpool game because Tierney's good, presumably.
Well, often Liverpool, one of the key sides in the league, exactly that. He's one of the best referees we've got in the division. So he will get Liverpool on a fairly high ratio. I don't see that as a negative in any. It's just a stat.
Yeah.
So.
Exactly.
It's interesting what he says here. And this is I do ask that you look at the comments I made in the following context. We as managers are contractually required to make ourselves available in a timely fashion. That's because you're so fantastically remunerated by the broadcasters that actually pay your wages. But here's the thing. If you do thousands of press conferences and thousands of post-match interviews, you should be adept and adroit enough to be able to navigate situations like that. If I sat here every time somebody told me I was a failed football club owner and fell on my knees and started to capitulate with emotion on the basis of it, then I'd be a weak person because I wouldn't have adjusted to the experiences of saying, I know what's coming, I know how emotional I am, I know I've got to control myself. After doing these matches, I've now managed Liverpool for 500 occasions. I now know what's coming after the game. So don't start with a nonsense about you've got a post-match interview. If you get punched in the face enough times, you get anaesthetised by it and you know what's coming. If you've got a post-match interview to do, you know what you can and can't say and why you shouldn't say it. And what he did was, he did the same as Alex Ferguson did with JP McManus and those people. He reached outside the box and thought he could say precisely what he wanted. McManus did, and those guys, when Ferguson was going about the Rock of Gibraltar, went, no, you don't get to operate in the real world that way. What Klopp has done is read the memo that actually I can say what I want, do what I want. I've been pushing the envelope. I've been running up against officials. I've been running on the pitch. I challenge everybody's authority, and he got pulled in line here. And this is what you get when you get the real world coming down and saying, actually, no. You can't say this. You can't question someone's professional integrity and just get away with it in a sport where impartiality is at the centre of everything.
I think the one thing we can pride ourselves on in this country, and whether it's just a naive version of what I see, I think you can go out there and there's an honesty from the referees. Personally, I don't think there's any bias from any referees towards any team, personally. I think they give decisions or don't give decisions on what they see. And there's an honesty about football in this country, I believe.
Yeah, exactly. Can you imagine what might have happened if he'd given him a red?
He's done him a favour, I think, giving him a yellow.
And
talking to him in the manner that he did.
Yeah. What Jim's implying is, can you imagine what he might have said if he'd have given him a red?
Oh, yeah.
He's got royally pulled up here, and so he should be, because ultimately, and Howard Webb coming to assist Paul Tierney with no mucking about, saying, I don't think so, son. You football manager over here, I don't think so.
Yeah.
You guys get to tee off on us on a daily basis. All your little mates that are pundits sitting in the box telling us how crap we are and what we get wrong. And now you're going to get into the territory of not only what we get wrong, you're going to have the audacity to say that we're potentially cheats too.
Yeah.
Jim White and Simon Jordan. Monday to Thursday morning, 10 till 1. On AM, on DAB, via the talkSPORT app and on your smart speaker. talkSPORT.